Bayani as hero is not a word you're going to find in the Spanish Tagalog dictionaries before the 20th century. The notation you're going to find is a warrior, a dagger, also a leader, but you're not going to find hero.
All peoples want a hero. It comes from a generation that had need for heroes. Rizal was one of the few ophthalmic surgeons in the entire Southeast Asia. This explains why Josephine Bracken's stepfather went all the way from Hong Kong to Dapitan to have his eyes cured. Rizal knew his place in history and knew that he was important in the way that the Philippines would develop, and he was willing to give up his life for that.
Some of the Filipinos were spending their time gambling, and others were going around with women. But Rizal felt the compulsion to tell people, what are we here in Spain for? We're here to save the country.
He was linked to a revolution which he, in fact, did not approve of. That's the irony of the whole situation. Asking Filipinos to lay down their arms and to go home, assuring them that he was not behind the revolution.
When you think about it, if Rizal sacrifices himself, that's fine. But to see a ruthless side of Rizal, someone who was willing to sacrifice even his own family, is a side of him we don't really see. In the 21st century, people want to have more human heroes. The secret to Rizal's greatness is actually his being human.
He was revered even before his death. But after his death, he was especially revered because there was no one like him.
The fact is, his life and his death inspired the revolution, and our history would not have been the same without him.
Hi students, I hope that you had a glimpse on that very short video clip about what you are or you will be expecting on this subject. So again, I welcome you all to G1213 Life and Writings of Rizal. So you just have entered your first pre-recorded discussion for this subject. And again, I welcome you all to this discussion. Although it is pre-recorded, but there are a lot of essential discussions on this subject that you will be aided at, and you will be learning offline or online at your own pace and your own time. So this is designed to further your knowledge from all the readings, and also to make sure that you are given the kind of pace that you need for this subject. So for today, we will be talking about Module 1, the world and the Philippines of Rizal's time. So why is there a need to look into the world and the Philippines of Rizal's time? So this module will at least give you that kind of setting, and that will let you understand that the kind of Rizal that we have today is a product of the 19th century Philippines, and that he did not just wake up and plan to become a hero, but there are a lot of things in his way that had one way or another help him or ignited his spirit towards nationalism. And that is our goal for this pre-recorded discussion. So specific learning outcomes, you are going to appraise the link between the individual and the society. In short, you are going to see the link between Rizal in the 19th century Philippines and the kind of society and the context of the Philippines that he lived and of the world on that time. And then you are going to analyze the various social, political, and economic changes that occurred in the 19th century, because these changes really has in one way or another allowed Rizal to exude that kind of action that he needs or that is needed during the 19th century. And that there are a lot of things in his surroundings, it might be social, political, or economic condition, that forced Rizal to act the way he did in that point of history. And then understand Jose Rizal in the context of his time, because it is a well-settled belief that you will not thoroughly appreciate the becoming of a hero unless you understand what pushed Rizal to be who he is in the 19th century and what we know about him today. So, I would like to start the discussion by telling you that the facts of the contemporary history are also facts about the successes and failure of individual men and women. So, in short, there are a lot of things that we can find in history that led us to where we are today. I'd like to cite some few examples. Okay, so the kind of Philippines that we have now is also a product of the different uprisings, the different colonization, and the different kind of environment, social, political, or economic condition that we had in the past. What else? Rizal is known today as a hero because of the different initiatives, propaganda, and campaigns for nationalism that he initiated during his time. And the independence that we celebrate every June 12, 1898, will not be celebrated if not of the heroes who fought alongside with with the different men and women in history that gave us, that allowed us to feel the flag being raised on that flagpole. In short, class, whatever we have today is a product of our own history. And we call that the context or the contextual analysis of our own history. And the reason why Module 1 started with the world and Philippines of Rizal's time is for you to understand that Rizal is also a product of his own history. And if not perhaps of this kind of environment, we are not so sure if we have this Jose Rizal in the textbooks that you have today. And so, the world of Rizal's time will be presented in this part of the discussion. Before we dig deeper to the Philippine situation, let us try to look at the world. Ano pala ang meron sa mundo during the 19th century that in one way or another resulted to a byproduct, which is Jose Rizal. So, be with me in this pre-recorded discussion and allow me to discuss that in detail. So, class, Rizal was born on June 19, 1861, and he died, which we celebrate every December 30, in the year 1896. So, between this 18th century, it's close to 19th century, what kind of world Rizal was born into? Okay? So, Rizal was born and grew up in the 19th century Philippines, which is a period of massive changes in Europe, in Spain, and in the Philippines. So, why do we look into these different categories of continent, of nations, and especially our own country? Because of course, we all know that Spain is in Europe, and the Philippines was once a colonized state or a colonized country by Spain, and Spain had been with us for almost 333 years. And so in the 19th century, there are a lot of changes that happened in Europe. There are a lot of countries protesting against the idea of being a colonized nation, and Spain was also had experienced a lot of changes. When we say changes in the 19th century, in fact, there are only, because Spain was once a mistress of the world. When we talk about the mistress of the world, there are a lot of countries which it colonized together with Portugal, its rival. And this made Spain one of the most powerful country in the whole world. Now, those happened, however, during the late the closer to 19th century, Spain also had waned. When we say waned, it's losing some of its colony. And during that time, there are only 3 countries left. And that is Puerto Rico, Cuba, in the Philippines. And you might ask, Ma'am, what happened? Why is it that Spain had been losing its power and its colony? Because those will be discussed later on. But however, just to give you a glimpse, it's because there are several maladministration of their colony, and that they were not able to govern their colonies well, and so it led to different uprisings. But despite all of that, there's only 3 countries left with which Spain has been taking too much foothold into, and it is trying its best now to retain this country, and one of that is the Philippines. And so during this era, the glory and power of Spain had waned both in her colonies and in the world. In short, it's losing its power and its eminence in the world. And so the global context, or the 3 great revolutions, had something to do with the context of Rizal's time. In short, let us see what are the 3 great revolutions that happened in the 19th century that became the basis of the kind of Philippines that we had later on. So as you can see, if you are going to look at the picture, I know that some of you could not anymore relate to some of these candies, to some of the superheroes, or I'm not so sure if others could still relate. If you were able to hold this kind of Nokia that you can see in front, or if you were able to play patintero, tiyakad, luksong lubid, pico, or saranggola, or even if you were able to watch this cartoon series. So why am I presenting this? Because these are things that are present in the 19th century, in the century where I grew up, and in the century where I can still relate. And so the essence, therefore, why I am bringing you back to the 19th century is for you to understand what prompted Rizal to act the way he did in history. So just like us, or just like the kind of world that we grew up in the 19th century, which is now so different to the world that you grew up today. So instead of having these keypad phones, today you already have touch screens, Netflix, you are eating different kinds of candies, pero noon, these are things that are existing. And so allow me also to bring you back to that point in history. And so there are 3 kinds of revolutions, and so I would like to start with the Industrial Revolution. So the Industrial Revolution is one of the 3 revolutions that happened in the 19th century. It is an economic revolution which started with the invention of a steam engine and resulted to the use of machinery in the manufacturing sector in the cities of Europe. In short, to make it simple and plain, noon, most factories would rely to manual labor. They would rely so much on people in producing goods and services. However, with the rise of this steam engine, it is the first, it's like the motor, it is where, I know engineering students can relate to this. So it is the first invention that automated some of the industries of Europe in the 19th century. Instead of using manual labor, they are now using machines and industries. So what is the result of this? Because industries are now mechanized, it resulted to the people being laid off, people being replaced with machines, which is of course still true up until today. Instead of machines, we can see robots. So it is the breakthrough of cutting industrial expenses by replacing manual labor with industrial ones. And because of that, it led to the Industrial Revolution, because people who were laid off from their jobs, people who does not have any more chances to work into the manufactories in Europe, are trying to revolt and to ask for their rights to work. Because how could they provide for their family if these machines, most of these machines are replacing them? So ang advantage, the owners of these big tobacco industries have more harvest because it's mechanized. The disadvantage is people are being replaced with these machines. So it created that industrial revolution wherein, aside from people being replaced, or aside from people who are against this policy, it also became the start of other industries being invented. So from mechanizing industries, it led to the invention of trains, which makes the travel time shorter, because instead of using their vehicles, so trains, the first train was invented wherein people was able to go through different places in a short span of time. What else? So aside from these inventions, also ships were invented wherein people can now go from one island to the other, one country to the other. What else? It also they also invented telephones, cars, and the knowledge was easily spread in Europe because books can be transported from one place to the other. In short, everything about the world changed because of how industry and how inventions were created in the 19th century. Now, I'll go next to the French Revolution. This is the second outstanding event that happened in the 19th century. The French Revolution started a political revolution in Europe and in some parts of the world. Now, I don't want to discuss more about French Revolution because that is not the focus of our discussion. But I'd like to tell you what is now the breakthrough of the French Revolution in the 19th century. Now, of course, as a short backgrounder, this revolution allowed the peasants to overthrow despotic rule, overthrow landlords who are abusing the rights of the common people. In short, the French Revolution was the first revolution that sent a message to the entire world that people has the capacity to overthrow despotic government. And so, nagkaroon ng idea ang ibang mga bansa that pwede pala that if people will band together, they can create or they can change a despotic government or an autocratic leader. And that is why most of the colonies that Spain had they tried to overthrow the despotic rule. And the same thing that happened to the Philippines eventually. Now, what about the American Revolution? So in this period, the colonies first rejected the authority of the British Parliament to govern without representation and form self-independent states. So aside from what happened in the Industrial Revolution, in the French Revolution, in the American Revolution, it also sent a signal to the world that there is a need for representation, meaning people should be put into the mainstream and they have to be represented for them to be heard. Because how could you give the people or the things that these people need if you are not going to hear what they want? And so, if you are going to sum it all up, the three kinds of revolutions that happened to the world in the 19th century, you will realize that it is now it now falls into the age of Enlightenment. People were open to the idea that there are a lot of things that they can do, that they cannot just rely to a despotic ruler or to a abusive ruler to do what they want. So those are the three revolutions. So what else? I'd like to add that the 19th century is also the age of the rise of social science, or the period of Enlightenment. I know you're familiar with this. It is when we say reliance on human reason rather than on faith and religion. Meaning, the people now realize that science plays a huge role for us to understand the world. I just like to give you an example. Before the exploration to the different before space exploration was being conducted, people believed that the world is flat and that there is that point wherein you will fall down because no, sabi nila, if you will go to the end part of the world, baka mahulog ka. And that's the belief because they thought that the world is flat. Now, when Galileo Galilei was able to prove that the world is round, this preempted people to do more explorative idea to understand why are we round, so why is there day and night, and there are a lot of things that were answered by science, the law of gravity, and then so on and so forth. So people became more interested to science rather than on what faith and religion has been telling them, that everything was of course reliance on the idea of faith. And so these are things that are really something that we can glean on the 19th century. And of course, I'd like also to add the opening of the Suez Canal. This is very important to the Philippines because the distance of travel between Europe and Philippines was significantly shortened and brought the country closer to Spain. So I'd like to show you this picture. As you can see, from Spain, from Europe, before, you really have to take this route. It would take most of them to travel around 6 months, I think, to travel from Europe to the Philippines. Now, using this route, it shortened the travel time because this is the canal, wherein due to the invention of the different machineries, people were able to create a passage in Suez Canal, and this became as what we call it, in our layman term, as the shortcut. And then it brought the Philippines closer to our colonizer, which is Europe. So I hope you can see this picture. This is an air view, an aerial view of the Suez Canal, and this is a closer look of the Suez Canal. So I hope that it's giving you that kind of idea. Now, so what are the effects of the developments and the modernization of the Philippines in the 19th century, especially to the 21st century? So again, as what I've said earlier, it had led to different inventions. It had led to more explorative industries, machines, cell phones that were upgraded. We have trains that are fast as lightning. We have aircraft that could lead you to wherever you want to be in the world. Now, aside from that question, I'd like to pose this very important question. In the turn of the 19th century, what happened to the Philippines? So that is the question that will be reflected on the second half of this discussion for you to understand how Rizal was how Rizal became a product of the 19th century. And so as I've said earlier, Spain had so many former colonies, but because of these different changes, because of different revolutions that is happening, only 3 were left, and that is Philippines, Puerto Rico, and Cuba. And so during the times of the 19th century, Rizal, there are a lot of sinister shadows of Spain's darkened the Spain skies, because if I want to explain it briefly, we suffered as well from the despotic rule that the Spaniards are putting up into most of its colonies. In short, a colonizer will not lose its colonies if they are just governing it properly, but it's not the case. During that time, Spain has different evils that prompted people to go against them, and that they wanted to gain that kind of independence that they saw in the world. And so here are the different evils of the Philippines during the 19th century. This is the kind of condition that Rizal had grew up and lived with. Okay, so the evils will fall on the instability of the administration. We will be discussing it one by one. Corrupt officialdom, human rights denied to Filipinos, no representation in the Spanish Cortes, no equality, maladministration of justice, philocracy, Guardia Civil, hacienda owned by the Friars, and racial discrimination. So let's first start with the instability of the colonial administration. So before, during the 19th century, Spain has 4 constitutions, 28 parliaments, 529 ministers, and a lot of revolutions that are coming from their colonies. With all of this, there's only one basic understanding, that if a country will change its constitution from time to time, elect different parliaments, different ministers, and are suffering from different revolutions, that kind of government is unstable, no? Meaning, you will not change your constitution if you think the first one is stable enough. You will not change your leaders up until you feel that your leaders are good enough. In short, they are unstable, meaning they are suffering from incompetency, no, conflicting rules, conflicting laws, and ministers who are not doing their job. So that's why we call it instability of the colonial administration. And one of the contributing factor to that instability is their corrupt colonial officials. So before, no, we all know that, no, you can only get a job if you are rich. You can only get a job in the 19th century if you know someone in the in that kind of office. And it's more on, no, the jobs are being given if you are closer to the family. So that is the kind of corruption, no, that is already existing in the 19th century, that is not new to you in today's in the days, no, in the 21st century. And so what else? Representation. There is no was no cut off, and then the Spaniards decided to give us no representation in the Cortes, but not really zero, but there was. So in short, when the representation was stopped, we feel as if we are not properly represented. And when you are not represented, the mother country, kasi ganito yung relationship natin noon. We are the subject country and Spain is our mother country. And so the best way sana for the mother country to hear what is happening in the colonial state is for us to be represented. May magsabi sa kanila na, hey, this is something that is happening here. The Friars are doing this. The colonial officials, the Spaniards are doing this. But we cannot voice out our concern because we are not represented. What else? Human rights denied to Filipinos because more priority is given to the Spaniards, the pure blood and the half blood Spaniards, no, and no equality before the law because the law favors more the Spaniards who are in the Philippines rather than the Filipinos themselves. And of course, when we say Filipinos, they would always tag the Filipinos as, no, dark skin, short-nosed, black Filipinos, meaning we are really called as an Indio because of the color of our skin. We are treated as an inferior class in the 19th century. And there is that maladministration of justice. Whenever there are cases being filed in the court or in the Royal Audiencia, more preference are given to the Spaniards. And what else? If you want to go to court, it is costly. It is only, again, leaning towards the Spaniards, and it is very, very slow. In fact, as we go along with the discussion, you will realize now how the family of Rizal was also, no, a byproduct of, was also affected with this maladministration of justice. And philocracy, because most of the haciendas were owned by the friars, and that there is no separation between the church and the state. The friars now, or the priests, the Dominicans, the Augustinians, and the Recollects, no, were acting as if they are also the government. Why? Because since they own massive lands, and they allowed Filipinos to rent these lands, till these lands, plant this, and they will get taxes, they will get their shares out of the crops. Instead of creating a government, because wala nang separation, the friars are also acting as the government. It's what we so-called as the government of the friars, because, no, they are acting as if they had the mandate from the Spanish crown. And so forced labor, I know you're familiar with this, no? People male between 16 to 60 years old were forced to render um, labor, not just to create streets, churches, schools during the 19th century. It's what we so called as pro bono, free, but only no principalias, other middle class no can exempt themselves through paying the falia. And if you pay the falia, you pay something, then you will be exempted from forced labor. And so you can see no the kind of discrimination that is happening during that time. And Guardia Civil, they are the Spanish police guards that are also no trying to oppress the Filipinos. They wanted to be treated really as superior. In fact, there was a time no that when Rizal had passed through a Guardia Civil, kasi nga parang it was considered as dark, and so he was not able to see that the man whom he came across at was a Guardia Civil, and he was not able to bow down. And so because of that, nagalit ang Guardia Civil. He was extremely punished, no? And that is how we see no the kind of oppression that is happening in the 19th century. And of course, again, if you will connect it to philocracy, hacienda owned by the friars, because the friars are owning massive lands. And in fact, one of the recipient the Dominicans no and the family of Rizal no wanted to till a portion of the land, and so they rented some parts of Calamba, and they grew crops there. And of course, it was owned by the Dominicans. And you have to be familiarized with that, because that will be repeated as soon as we go to the life of Rizal. And so, what is now the implication? Again, if a friar owned a land, they obtained title of ownership from the King of Spain. And so, as soon as this title is given, Filipinos became tenants, because of course the lands were owned by the Spaniards. Filipinos will now apply, they want to apply as stealers of the land. No, they don't own it, but they will just pay taxes, and they will give portions of the earnings of the crops to the friars. So one of the tenants, no, just to relate it to Rizal, one of the tenants in the 19th century no, who created a lease application or submitted a lease of application was the family Rizal. And because of that, they gained the status of a principalia, a middle-class Filipino, because of the earnings that they got from the crops that they rented from the friars. So what is now is an overview of all of these things that we've just discussed today. What is now the implication of this principalia status of Rizal to the family? So we will now go back to all that we discussed from the world and the Philippines of Rizal's time. Because of this relationship, Rizal was born to a principalia or a middle-class family. Because the family has share to the earnings of the land, they can afford to send Rizal to education abroad. And because of the rise of social sciences, the distance of travel between the Philippines to Europe was significantly shortened, and it's more easy for Rizal to travel from the Philippines to Europe and gain that education. So what's the relationship? When Rizal arrived in Europe, he realized the difference between the European free nations and the Philippines, which is a colonized nations. And because of that, the Filipinos, along with him, who studied in Europe, was able to realize that the Filipinos were indeed oppressed with all the evils that I just presented you a while ago. So they were able to create that difference. They were able to analyze why is it that the Spaniards here in the mother country are free, and why is it that we are free, but in the Philippines there's a lot of oppression going on. Who will help them? What can we do? And that started the becoming of a Rizal. In short, Rizal was molded to all these issues in the 19th century that allowed him to speak not only for himself but for the Filipinos. Rizal was a product of the 19th century where he saw that there are a lot of things that the people can do. They can overthrow a despotic government. They can rely on social sciences rather than on faith and religion. And that people has, if they just band together, they can overthrow a despotic government. And if only people will unite together for that common goal, why not apply it to the Philippines? In short, the idea of independence or assimilation that Rizal had in the 19th century was a byproduct of the political situation that he was in, no? Oppressions, maladministration of justice. If you were born in the 19th century, I think you will feel the same. In short, Rizal lived, awakened, and exposed to a 19th century Philippines which is a century of oppression, of marginalization, and a stage where people, no, they were awakened that people can really do something. And this is the reason why we wanted you to learn this in Module 1, for you to understand that before we will go to the life, death, and Rizal, he was already exposed to these social realities. The Filipinos were already exposed to these social realities for 333 years. But no one dared to stop these cruelties. Not until Rizal was able to put it down on paper or through a novel in his Noli Me Tangere and El Filibusterismo. So class, I hope that the conditions of the 19th century Philippines were all laid down to you today in this session. Because whatever condition that we had in the 19th century, again, and the kind of freedom that we have today is because people like Rizal, during that period of time, realized that enough is enough. Someone must carry the cross and fight for independence and nation building. So that's all for today, class. I hope that you learned something in this module. And this is something that you have to understand, because as we go along with the next succeeding modules, this will keep you, this theory and all the lessons that we had today will keep you on track on the discussion of the life, works, and writings of Rizal. So class, if you have questions, feel free to inquire in our Diagler class or send a message to your instructor. And I hope that you had a thorough understanding on the world and Philippines of Rizal's time. Until we meet again on our second module, up until now, make sure to complete the PAAs if there are any assigned for you, and read the reading materials that are of course assigned for the next module. Thank you so much for being with me today. Until our next discussion, have a good day, and of course, stay safe always.